Well, welcome everyone. I know we have a lot of customers that are just logging in as we get started here, but Steve's got a lot of great content again for us here on this year's IBMi in 2024. This is a webinar series in a way. We've been doing it for 8 years now, we figured out. And this year we're going to take you from the AS400 era to AI and the role that IBMi snuggles along with AI technology. And we're very fortunate again to have Steve Will back. He's a IBM Distinguished Engineer, IBMi CTO and Chief Architect for the platform, which if you don't know, the home of the platform is in Rochester, Minnesota. So thank you, Steve. I'm Tom Huntington. I'm going to act as your moderator today for this webinar. This is a little bit different webinar because it's 90 minutes long. Typical ones are either 30 or 60 minutes that we do, but we have so much great content to take you through here. We're very excited. I'm an IBM Power Champion. I've been with the Fortra company for 36 years, been a Power Champion now for a little over 8 years, and very excited again to hear Steve talk and update us on IBMi in 2024. Steve, maybe some additional things to your bio you want to add in, and welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, I joined the company in January of 85, so I'm at 39 plus years now. I'll celebrate 40 next January, and I've spent my whole time on what was this platform before this platform became what it is. You and I were just talking about the name of the platform. IBMi is 16 years old. I became chief architect almost exactly 17 years ago. It was early August, 17 years ago. So I've been doing this particular job for this platform for a long time, and I love the opportunity that we have every year to take people who've been with the platform for a long, long time and remind them of where it came from and where it's gotten to. And also, we always seem to have some people who either listen to us live or listen to the recording who are younger tenure, as we were talking about in our little pre-meeting. Anyway, I love being able to sort of bridge the gap and teach some people some things they may not have known. So glad to be here today.
Well, thank you, Steve. We're excited to have you here on behalf of Fortra. Thank you for joining us. Here's the topics you're going to cover. I'll let you talk to this slide, and then we'll have a polling question shortly.
Sure. Yeah. Just to let everybody know kind of what this thing is going to be. In previous years, especially 3, 4, 5 years ago, I would just use this presentation webcast to talk about the architecture of the platform, and I would go super deep into it. This year, because there's been so much change and so much talk, particularly about AI, I wanted to do kind of a bridge. I want to tell people, okay, yeah, here's the timeline, here's where we were. I want to tell people how the business is, and then I've got a section of this that a lot of people seem to need fairly frequently, which is, okay, but why is IBMi different and beneficial to my business? And so I've got this IBMi stuff, why IBMi, and then I talk about the architecture. And then we're going to go on to the things we're focusing on recently, which is where I will talk about AI stuff. So anyway, it's a lot of information, as Tom said, and I will try very hard to give every topic the right amount of time.
With that, we want to launch our first polling question. How much experience do you have with IBMi? You have choices here: more than 30 years, 21 to 30, 11 to 20, 1 to 10, less than 1 year. We know there are new people. You may have come over from another platform. Just had a conversation I was telling Steve yesterday with a customer in the banking industry, all Windows type people managing IBMi, calling IBMi actually a mainframe. So pretty interesting to hear that terminology. But if you think about IBMi and where it's come in some sense of the word, it is a mainframe today, because it is that large database server that's hosting a majority of your business data. And but there's a lot of reasons why it's not a mainframe. So I'm not sure you're going to talk about that, Steve, today. But let's see here. I'm going to, that's probably enough time on the poll. I'm going to close it out here. and share the results. So we are seeing about 50% of you have more than 30 years, Steve. That's pretty interesting.
Yep. So I'll definitely,
Cool.
you guys will be reminded of things, but the folks who are in that 11 to 20 and under, I think there are things that they'll learn or at least be reminded of. All right, cool.
And then, less than 10 years, we got 10%, 13% of the market with less than 10 years experience. So I'm going to hide that, and you should have control now again. Go right ahead.
All right, so let's see if I can make my screen go forward. There we are. All right, perfect. Let's get started. Folks, I'm going to leave my video on. I personally find it easier to hear and see a person talking. So hopefully that's going to work for you. If my face is distracting you, just push me off the screen. Okay. For those of you who have been with this platform for 30 or more years, you will recognize the origins of this system. And we come from a long heritage of systems being designed by IBM to solve business problems. And so we count the beginning of this platform as being AS400 back in 1988. We celebrated the 35th anniversary just last year, counting from that date. But as some of you who are longer lived know, we actually took major portions of the architecture from the System 38 and major design elements and application suites from the System 36. And so as we have created this platform and as we have moved forward, what we have consistently done is looked at what are the value propositions and architectural values that can bring true value to business in a very integrated way. And we have continued to merge new technologies together while providing that same thought process, that same value proposition. We're going to integrate things. We're going to make it important to business, and particularly to business applications, that they're running on top of this platform, while we take the best technology in the industry and incorporate it under the covers. And so, for example, we migrated from what was our proprietary hardware and our proprietary storage technology to things that were being used across IBM and then ultimately across the industry, especially for storage. We took advantage of advancements that were being made in all of microprocessors, but certainly the stuff that was being done in Power. And now every generation of Power has things in it that we gain benefits from, because we've been working with the Power architects since the inception of the idea of that next Power family, things that they're going to do that are specifically useful to the IBMi operating system and the way we use storage and the way we use memory and the way we use the database and so on. So this is a long history, and I can't cover everything ever anymore. I don't know how many hours it would take me to do it. But during the course of this presentation, I'm going to be pointing out some specific things that have made this platform not only survive, but thrive. And that brings me to the next part of the presentation, which is I want you to understand how the business is doing. So I'm trying to make my page go up here. Oops, that was the wrong direction. There we go, page down. IBMi is a part of the Power family, and our part of the Power family is not only a key contributor, I'll talk about that in just a second, but it has been growing for more than 2 years. If you talk about the IBMi software revenue that we bring in, we are the largest profit contributor to the Power family, bar none. Okay, so that's an important business metric that businesses use, like IBM, to determine, what should get investment. So the fact that we generate such a good profit within our part of the marketplace is something that makes IBM want to continue to invest in us, and that's certainly what they've been doing. But it's not just the software. We drive more hardware every quarter as well. A lot of times it's existing clients who are taking advantage of IBMi to do more workload than ever. And certainly in the years since the pandemic hit, we find many of our customers growing the amount of work that they're doing. Number one, because their businesses are growing. Number two, because they acquire businesses and then move those workloads onto IBMi. I've been seeing so many of our customers who are telling me, I've purchased one or two, or even I heard at an event earlier this year, 9 of the competitors in the last 2.5 years. Every one of those competitors ran on some other platform, but now their workloads got migrated into IBMi. And when that happens, you might not say we have any more customers, because the business that acquired the other 9 businesses is still one customer. But in the end, of course, far, far more people are being affected by and are using the IBMi platform. That growth is contributing to IBMi's growth. So we're a very, very, very healthy business right now, and it's based a lot on the value proposition that IBMi has on power. And so, as I mentioned to you, I am going to be taking you through at the beginning of this a piece of it's not really marketing, it's explanation, it's technical explanation of what it is about IBMi that makes us a valuable platform to be on for our clients. We've had various versions of this throughout history called Why I or Why IBMi. I've gathered these things together because I think it's important that all of you who are listening, and especially as we get into, okay, what are we going to be doing with AI when I get to that part of the presentation, why would you want to be thinking about doing AI with IBMi? Well, it's because in part of the value proposition that IBMi has that is unique because of how IBMi is different than other platforms that we compete against. So let's go into this, why IBMi. Let's remember, those of us who are old enough to remember, let's remember that way, way, way back before AS400 was introduced, we were commissioned with solving business problems for customers by creating a system such that an application that ran on that system would gain benefits because it was running on the system that it couldn't get elsewhere. Every application is going to need to manage its data. Every application is going to need to manage its security. Every application is going to have to bring pieces together because all applications are built using other pieces of software. All applications are going to succeed only if they, as applications, can grow and change as customers grow and as technology changes. Okay, and every application vendor is going to want to write their stuff one time and not have to rewrite it again. Now, for those of you who are younger in the marketplace, this sort of platform did not exist back then. And when AS400 was architected to solve these problems, we were the first and only platform that had architectural value behind each of these things. So for example, we have this architecture of having a single level store platform. I'm going to talk in more detail about that later. That's why I'm going to gloss over it here. And it is directly architected with our fully relational database, DB2-4i. Okay, so those two things work together. Again, back in those days, every application had to manage and tell their users how to manage the storage for their applications on other platforms. On IBMi, they could turn it all over to the operating system, and we would manage the data, we would manage the storage, we would manage how the data was laid out in storage. Now, sure, you could, if you were an application vendor who really cared about one specific thing, you could probably get and do some things, but for the most part, we hid that stuff. We did that in an integrated way. So that's going to provide some value, and I'll show you that in a couple of charts. Okay. We had from the very beginning an object-based architecture because we wanted to make sure that every application could be built knowing that we would protect their software, the software that they did, plus the data that they had, in ways so that we could say only the operating system could change the contents of objects at the lowest level. All users and applications had to come in through defined methods, defined APIs. And for that reason, IBMi has never been able to have the kinds of viruses and Trojan horses on it that other platforms have. And so we were able to guarantee to an application vendor that they could count on this level of protection and invariability. And again, it was built into the operating system. Other people have tried to do similar things to this through security packages, but at the level of the kernel, at the level of the operating system, it was built there. Then, because every application needs other software to work besides the operating system, we began to integrate into the operating system the key things that every application was going to need. Now, at the beginning, that was, compilers and things like that, but it became things like web servers and application servers and that sort of thing that you have to put together. And again, I'll show that in a chart in a minute. Okay, and then from the very beginning, we knew that customers were going to be better off if you could have your primary ERP application, your enterprise resource planning application, your primary CRM application, customer resource management or customer relationship management, all running on the same system. You would be far better off if you could manage it in one place, and if they could use this one single operating system instance, this one single box, to do everything their business needed to do. And so we built an operating system that was based on the concept that we will have multiple workloads running on this platform. You need to be able to manage them, balance them, etc. They need to be able to use the same data without getting in the way of each other using that same data. And so we created an operating system that does that. Okay. Now, that may sound like, of course, everybody does that. But if you think about it, in the world today, people who are running Windows virtual machines are putting them on top of a virtualizer, right? A virtual machine construct, because the Windows operating system itself assumes that the application that's running in that Windows operating system is on its own. It's doing its own thing, and so you have to have essentially root access to be able to do that. Same sort of thing in a lot of Unix environments. And so you need, every time you want to put two workloads on the same machine, you have to have two virtual machines that don't interact with one another. In our architecture, we've always had the ability to have subsystems, and within subsystems jobs, having multiple workloads running on top of each other. And so we envisioned this platform from the very beginning to be a place where you could run multiple workloads, manage multiple workloads, and yet keep things balanced and secure. And then we created this thing called the Technology Independent Machine Interface, so that when you compiled a piece of code, you compiled it down to a set of virtual machine instructions so that we could, under the covers, change the hardware for you, but you didn't have to recompile your application. And that is still revolutionary in the industry. So these architectural elements do in fact make us different from our competition, and that will have business value. Now, when we first did this also, we had our own unique servers and storage, and I already showed you in the timeline that those servers and storage, that stuff underneath the technology independent machine interface, did change over time, but it didn't require disruption in most of the applications that were out there that were doing business work. Sure, if you manage the platform, you had to change to know different kinds of storage and so on, but the business applications didn't have to change for that. Now, that does provide, all of that does provide some business value that makes us unique. And one of the ways to show that is to imagine that you are a bank and you are going to buy a banking application. So this chart envisions an ABC banking application, and what you would need to run that application if you are on IBMi versus on Windows. And so without going through every line here, the level of integration that we have shows that, okay, where you might have to get some sort of storage management application to help you manage storage for your banking application, IBMi will take care of that for you. If you are going to have virtualization, you're going to have VMware or something like that, right, underneath each of these so that you can have multiple applications running on the same physical hardware. We take care of that in IBMi with subsystems, or if you really want to, you can have multiple IBMis, but most small banks in particular only have to have one image of IBMi, even if they are running workloads for multiple customers or multiple clients or multiple banks. So all of the stuff that you have to have underneath ABC banking is basically managed by IBM, provided by IBM in the IBMi space, where it has to be managed, acquired, put together, often by consultants in the non-IBMi case. We use Windows here because that's been our typical competition in the small and medium business space. So this is truly a value that you get from being on the architecture that we have today. Now, another thing that means is that you can have the same level of work be done by far fewer servers. We have seen many of our customers who we have won from Windows environments who had, you know, on the order of 10, 20, 30 Windows servers, or at least Windows servers with that many different virtual machines on them that could be moved over and run, even if they were super large servers, on a couple of servers in Power, taking advantage of Power's ability to have multiple virtual machines with IBMi after you've moved those applications into IBMi, or the fact that IBMi itself can have multiple subsystems running in the same partition, the same virtual machine, and that ends up costing you then much less to manage. The complexity always means cost, okay? And these days, for folks who are conscious about how much energy they're using, right, our more modern Power families can use much less power than a farm of Windows servers or Unix servers. And so again, that architecture that we have is not just about simplicity, and it's not just about making things nice for the applications. It actually makes things better for the value proposition within an IT infrastructure. Now, another part of what our integration brings to clients is that you can do more with fewer people. I think if any of you are in businesses where you have a mainframe or a bunch of Windows boxes, what you will find is that those other platforms require far more people to manage them. And that is in large part because of the automation we integrated into IBMi. The easiest example is the database and storage thing, but it's more than that. Again, I'll get into the database and storage stuff a little bit, but let me just talk about it here. Because DB2 and our storage management are constantly looking at how should we use storage and the indexes we built on top of our database to improve performance, you don't have to hire the kind of storage administrators and database administrators that are necessary on other platforms, because those people in those other platforms have the job of looking at performance metrics, moving data around, building indexes that then they have to apply. That's human resource that is not necessary on IBMi because we're doing that stuff for you. There are similar things in work management and so on. And so once you have accounted for how much the operating system does, and then the fact that you can do it on fewer systems, you do not need nearly as many people. And that's where doing a total cost of ownership study for IBMi is so important, to think about the number of people that you have to manage across the whole estate. This particular graphic was from a study that was done several years ago, but we find the same thing happening today. I didn't put the numbers here. This is in general, even if the hardware costs you around about the same, even if the licenses cost you around about the same, by the time you get to how many people it takes to manage the platform, architecturally, we help you have fewer people. Another thing that we excel in as a platform, and this is an architectural thing, is how little downtime you can expect to have from IBMi. And downtime is an expense. This, again, was from a study that was done by Cork Lepton a while back. The numbers aren't important. What's important is we still find that customers who put some of their business on, say, a Linux Oracle platform or a Windows SQL platform, they will have far more downtime during the course of a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year period of time. Part of that is planned downtime that's absolutely necessary in those environments, because as they get updates, they have to take it. And we are far better at taking updates and not bringing you down. We've gotten better over the years. We used to be worse, and there are still ways we can go. But there's also the fact that we are a far more reliable platform. Between Power and IBMi, we do not go down unexpectedly nearly as often as those other platforms. And it's still mystifying to me that people think, well, it's just part of Windows, it's going to go down and you just have to bring it back up again. Okay, but if your business is critically reliant on that platform, wouldn't you rather be on a platform where it's a real surprise if the system ever goes down? And that's what we are. It brings real business value to be as reliable as we are. Now, another thing, and this is just sort of a funny way to show this, the security that we built into the platform means that you don't have to have constant people paying attention to security, going to conferences where they learn about the latest security loopholes and fixes and so on. When IBMi, most security people can take their jobs seriously, but take a little more time. Again, this is a funny way to look at it, but we do have security advisories related to IBMi. I'm not saying we don't, but the amount of time you have to devote to that as compared to on other platforms, significantly less. And again, that is a business value that comes from our architecture. Now, the database that is included in IBMi is not separate. It is part of the architecture, and therefore it is built to be secure. It is built to be scalable. We have customers who only have a little bit of data, and we have some of the largest data farms in the industry all running on DB2 We have to be that scalable, but we build DB2 to be autonomic. That is, learn from how the data is being used, adapt to it, and make that that performance get better. We've also built in analytics and AI, and I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the AI bit. And it's all easier to use and maintain because it is integrated so tightly with our storage management. Again, I'll get there in a little bit. Now, one of the key demonstrators of how well this architecture has provided the business value that we intended it to do is when we ask our customers who have multiple platforms, do you believe your IBMi server gives you a better return on investment than other servers? And I want to thank Fortra for working with us every year to put out their survey and get this information, because we hear from so many of our customers just how passionate they are about the platform. But it's important that they also be able to communicate to their bosses, we get a better return on investment. That's why we continue to invest in this platform. Okay, and so if you need to explain to your business, why are you on this platform? These charts that I have been showing you, particularly with this one at the end or near the end, shows you that we are on a platform that other people also believe gives them tremendous value. Now, the last little bit I'm going to talk about in terms of how IBMi is run is not specifically architectural, but it is something that differentiates us, and that is how much we use the client, the community, to drive what we do. We have advisory councils, advisory groups all around the world, throughout all of the industries that we have. These are the biggest ones, and we even have ways for every user to submit ideas about how we ought to change or advance the platform. All of IBM has this ideas program that's in the bottom right there. All of IBM does. IBMi gets more ideas submitted to it than anything else in IBM. And we respond to those things and fulfill those ideas at a greater rate than anybody else does, because we believe that the value that we bring has to be driven by people who use the platform telling us what's the next step that they want to take for their business. Okay. So this whole little bit that I've been talking about here is the why IBMi thing. If you want this when we're done with it, you'll be able to have these charts when we're done with it. This is that summary page of everything that I just talked about. It is what the architecture and the way we go to business does that's different and that provides real business value. All right, so I've gotten finished with that part. Now I'm going to start bridging to some specifics about technology that has changed over time that we have built on top of. So let's go back to this. This is that architecture picture. I'm now going to drill down and do some architectural level stuff related to the upper left quadrant, the DB2 and single level store thing. Again, in previous years, when we first started this webcast series, I would spend a great deal of time on all of these. I bet those things are out there and you can listen to them. And if anybody ever wants me to do the full architecture thing again, I can do it. But I want to specifically talk about some things that really matter in how the data that drives every application, the data that's so important to every business, and our unique architecture for DB2 and single level store provide value. So that's what we're going to do here. Okay, so let's go back to the System 38. The System 38 was the first and only system at the time. We're still the only system, but the only system at the time that did this architecture for managing storage. What it said was, every piece of storage that is going to be attached to this operating system, we're going to treat as if it's just memory. We don't want the application provider to have to worry about where is this stored in memory or on disk, what kind of disk, etc. And to contrast this now, at the time, there was no other place that could do that. Every application had to worry about this. Okay, we created an architecture based on Frank Soltis's PhD paper for single level storage, so that we would say, whatever your program is going to do with storage, we'll take care of where we put it, whether it's in memory or it's in single level store. And we, in fact, created our whole address space so that we could say some of this address space is in memory, some of this address space is on disk, but you won't know the difference. Okay. Now, at the time, we had a 48-bit address because that was the kind of processor we were on. Over time, we're going to change that. That's not the important thing. The important thing is that this concept provided real value to customers from the day it was introduced. Now, that means that when we get hold of the data, we can make smart decisions about where to put that data so that you get the best possible performance. And so DB2 and single level store can work together to determine where that data should be stored when it needs to be stored long term. And by the way, that is another attribute of this. Essentially, in the early 80s, we figured every piece of data that was going to be used by a customer application was going to want to be backed up by physical storage, right? You have a bunch of information about a bank account or a customer or a supplier. You're going to want that stored not just in system memory that's very, very transitory, but you're going to want it stored out in storage on a physical piece of hardware somewhere, so that when you want to, you can take your system down, bring it back up, and it won't have disappeared because it was in memory. So even though we thought about and architected this to look like it was all storage, memory storage that was essentially memory in the view of the operating system, we architected this to put everything on storage. Okay. Well, eventually, the way people wrote applications actually changed, especially as web programming came into existence. We had a new application type that was very is still very important in the industry, which is something that comes onto your system, works for a little while, and then disappears, like an application service request, a web browser information, that sort of thing. In that environment, most of the data that is being used actually doesn't ever need to get put in storage. It is a temporary piece of data for the period of time that you are doing the service call or the time that you are showing a web page. And so we actually had to enhance our storage model to have something besides single level store. Because if you only had single level store, then anytime you had a need for this temporary storage, because single level store was architected to also put things on storage, there was overhead of creating space where this data would be put if it needed to be put there, but it never did, okay? And so if you have an application that's only going to need temporary storage while it runs, we created TerraSpace. TerraSpace is a different way of managing memory and storage. Now, sometimes it does need to be paged out. I'm not saying that this temporary storage never ends up on disk, but this data is not intended to be stored long term. Okay, so it was a different kind of storage. And so if you're running a web application, most of what you're using is TerraSpace storage. But when you then need to put something, say you're updating the information in a bank account, you'll create a DB2 request that will then make that go into single level store into the database. And it's not that you're never putting anything on disk, it's that most of what you use as an application is temporary and therefore can be managed more efficiently if it's in TerraSpace. We ask customers, well, we've sort of stopped asking customers, but we put TerraSpace out there years and years and years ago, and we started asking customers if they were using TerraSpace, because if you're an application writer, you can become aware of the fact that you're using TerraSpace and specifically manage your memory that way if you want to. You don't have to, but you can if you want to. So we started asking people if they were using TerraSpace, and by and large, people say no, they're not, whereas you all are. I mean, if you do web or web application, or if you do open source on IBMi, you're using TerraSpace, whether you know it or not, and it sits in the architecture right next to single level store and manages it together. So that's one way in which we've had to advance the architecture, and again, without you generally speaking knowing that. The other is about how the database takes advantage of technology advancement to be able to run your database queries better. This is just a couple of quick pictures to kind of show you the evolution. If you think about a relational database, or any database really, but certainly a relational database, what you're doing is saying, I have data on my machine and I want to get some information about that data. Now, you could just want one record, that's an easy answer, but a lot of times what people want is, I want all the records that look like this, that are by this customer, that have this limit. That's a query, right? And from the very beginning, we had a fully relational database with a classic query engine that would give you that answer. But things got more and more complex, and our database engineers, the architects who do the rocket science behind database, recognized that we could do better. We could create a query engine that would take advantage of the fact that it was dealing with SQL. See, there are other ways to get at the data. For those of you who are newer to the platform, I hope you're only using SQL, but there are other ways of getting at our database besides SQL. If you only use SQL, the query engine that exists today can learn from the past. It can see that a particular query, exactly the same, was handled in a certain way, and we can find a better way to do it so it gets faster. We can notice that other queries that are similar had better ways of using indexes, and we can make that get better. So we created a new query engine that could learn from the queries. And even from application to application, one application's query could end up creating advice within the database that would help another application's queries get better, okay? This is an architectural difference between us and other databases. It's even a difference between us and other DB2 instances, because we have the ability to work with our storage management on how this stuff works together. Now, over time, we had to make sure that this super fast engine that we created could answer more and more things. I'll show you a timeline at the very end that talks about when we introduced this new query engine, but this is the query engine that's being used by almost all queries that are done these days. Okay, so over time, we had to keep both query engines in and have each engine handle the requests that it was going to be most beneficial for. And now that's almost all the requests that come into us are handled by this new query engine that we architected in. Again, you get the benefit from the architecture and from our desire to constantly make our operating system a better place to be for an application than other places. Okay. We also integrated into IBMi a way to deal with new ways of doing data. Now, it turns out that most of the applications that run businesses are very transaction oriented, and that means very record oriented. Don't have to get into details there, but generally speaking, you're going to get higher performance if your data is stored where one record represents, information about one customer, for example. But people were discovering that as they wanted to do analytics across large sets of records, if they organized their data differently, they could answer those questions more quickly. And so some other databases and some applications began touting the fact that they were changing the way they stored data to be more columnar. That is, they would store data so you could get at all of the information about customers in one region much more quickly because they were stored that way. Okay, that's fine, but if you are primarily doing transactions, having your data organized in that way actually slowed your transaction processing down. It may have sped your analytics up, but it can slow your transactions down. And so we architected in a way for us to have a virtual view that was columnar. So we could easily find all of the customers in this particular region, knowing that in a very simple, easy, fast way. We architected that using something called encoded vector indexes. And yet still, the data was stored in the way that would keep transactions responding most quickly, because that is the core business application template for most of the uses for IBMi. Of course, people want to do analytics, and we made it faster to do that sort of thing, but you got to run your business fast. You can't all of a sudden have that slow down just because now you want things to be analytically faster. So what I've tried to show you with this set of charts is that each of those elements that we have for doing our architecture differently than other platforms provides you value, right? This storage component that I talked about in that upper left-hand corner is really a combination of two architectural elements, DB2 for I and single level storage and TerraSpace management, so that over time, as database capabilities were advanced, as new storage mechanisms were advanced, as new kinds of long-term storage were advanced, when we moved from spinning disk to solid state disk to SANs to NPIV and whatever comes next, we take care of making sure that you get the benefit of that in your application without you having to become an expert at it. Let me just make one more quick point, because SANs is important. Of course, we can attach storage area networks to IBMi. Of course we can. In fact, most of our larger customers use storage area networks for IBMi. But before SANs existed, IBMi was doing what SANs do today. What SANs do today is, with the data that they get, they figure out how you're using your data, and they try to spread that stuff across and protect it, and that's all very well and good. We integrate our single level storage management with the capabilities of the SANs that are connected so that we don't duplicate effort. okay? But this concept of what SANs do to be able to use disks more efficiently was actually built into single level store from the very beginning. All right, so the next bit that we're going to talk about is a couple more things about how you want to be able to bring information to your business about IBMi and its value. And then we're going to take a little break, and then I'll come back and talk about the new stuff. But the last couple things I want to talk about here, everybody should be aware and should be able to show their businesses. We've been doing this for a long time. Every 3 years, we have major releases. Every 6 months, we announce new capabilities in our technology refreshes, and that's never going to end. There is no reason to believe it's ever going to end. We are a very good business for IBM. We've got businesses that depend on us who keep driving the investment in this business. So we will continue to do that. I've got my team working on the deliverables that are going to come this year and next year and in the next major releases and so on. And we have a long roadmap ahead of us. This roadmap shows you that we have plans for supported releases that go all the way out into the 2030s. We have releases beyond what we have done by, well, as I said, there's never an end. So it's important that people understand this is not a platform that's going to disappear on you. All right, so I think I've reached our little breaking point. Tom, you can take over. I will go off camera for a minute and get a little drink.
There you go. Thank you, Steve. Wonderful, wonderful start to the day here listening to you. I learned something new every time. Just recently, not too long ago, about 3 weeks ago, I was talking to a customer. They hadn't IPL'd their system for over 8 years, and yet they were thinking about getting off of IBMi. And I'm like thinking, wow, it's a lot of uptime and not much downtime, right? So why would a business leave IBMi? Well, speaking of IBMi, Fortra's been in the space for many years. We were Help Systems. We had a name change about 18 months ago. That's all it was. But IBMi is important to us. We help customers out, backup recovery, HA, document management, cybersecurity, monitoring systems, business intelligence, you know, all those query things and accessing your data. I'm always amazed the number of customers that say they just don't know how to access IBMi data. We help you size your next system, capacity planning, reporting, and of course, Fortra started with automation. Steve talked a little bit about the marketplace survey, the return on investment slide. This is the top concerns for IBMi. We know that cybersecurity is on everybody's mind, modernizing applications, IBMi skills, IT and business automation. Hopefully along the way you've learned different sources for improving your skills. If not, one of the things I want to remind you about is Common. There's Common North America, there's Common Europe, and there's many other user groups around the globe that can help you out. One of the things that we do at Fortra is we sponsor the boot camps for IBMi systems administrators and security. These are free to you if you're a member of Common. Just go out there and join Common, whether you can travel or not. A lot of their education today is done virtually for this platform. Some other things to remind you about from Fortra, the IBMi Marketplace Survey, we'll be conducting that again in September and October. Yes, many of the questions are the same. We appreciate those who have been so loyal and have filled it out every single year. It's coming again. It'll be 11th year that we're doing the survey. Please fill it out. Also remind you, if you're worried about cybersecurity and you just don't know where to start, Fortra over 2 decades now have been doing free security scans. It's a valuable session for you. The little time of downloading some software, you run it, and then we spend an hour with you at least going through things that you could do to improve your security posture on the platform. Another thing to encourage you to do is tech updates. We do those periodically with customers and give them an overview of what's going on, but they can be very educational for your team. Fortra also participates in Solution Edition, and then I try to make it easy for you to find a local user group. Just simply click on user groups on IBMi. Oh, and before I forget, you know, the Steve Will seminar that we've been doing every year here in July, we broke that up last year, and if you use YouTube, you can go out, Google Steve Will IBM, and you will find all these videos broken down that go deeper into each of those different areas. More consumable, 7 minutes, 6 minutes long, that's kind of thing they've been, and we'll probably take some pieces from this year too and do the same. At Fortra, we have a lot of experts in the industry to help you out on cybersecurity, automation, development topics. So this is our team here. I won't go through everybody, but these are some of our leaders that you can talk to around the globe to help you out in various topics, from cybersecurity to automation to document management, etc. At Fortra, we're always bringing you additional topics, webinars. We're looking for your input. If you could use the Q&A and say, wow, we'd like to see a webinar on IBM VS, IBM HMC, deeper dives into backup and recovery, some cybersecurity topics, let us know about it, and we will work to bring that to you as an educational piece. As you saw, my experts there, we have a great team. We can dig into any topic and provide it as a webinar back to you and the community. Speaking of Fortra, we are, besides an IBMi company, we are a cybersecurity company. And one of the things that makes us unique is not only can we monitor proactively all your IBMi cybersecurity events, we can tie that into a managed offering called Fortra XDR, or Extended Detection and Response. Not to throw another acronym at you, but basically we can monitor your network, your servers, your IBMi servers, your endpoints and everything, and keep you ahead of the game when it comes to that big fear of being hacked in the market. And then to remind you, one more last thing that we're bringing, upcoming webinar. I know people are very excited or use BRMS out there for backup and recovery. We have Sarah Jacob coming in from Agile Technology. She's going to be talking about BRMS on August 14th and 15th. This will be a beginner to advanced set of sessions. Again, it's free. Feel free to sign up. And one last point on that, if you haven't seen, there was also an announcement this week. There's a new graphical interface for BRMS. So that's out there too. So back to you, Steve, and I think you still should have control of the mouse.
That's great. Thank you very much. As soon as I make a page move. Yep. Okay.
We're good. So, I'm going to mute myself then.
Great. Great. So folks, as I mentioned, I've been in this role now for very close to 17 years. And when I first took over the role, we tried to find a way to describe what our core strategy is. And over time, while this has changed a bit, the three basic things are still the same. We want to provide a platform strategically where solutions that are built on top of our platform get value because they're on top of our platform. And the technologies that we implement, the technologies that people who are writing solutions may change over time, but we want to make sure that we're there with the ability to do all of those things. We want to give people choices on how they move forward, and that often includes at least having some open technology as part of the options that they're going to use moving forward. And that includes these days, where are you going to run your platform? Are you going to have it in your data center and only in your data center? Or are you going to have it entirely managed somewhere else or run in some cloud environment? But how are you going to do programming? You're going to do open source in addition to things, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But whatever we do, we try to integrate that technology to give you the kind of return on investment and total cost of ownership benefit that we talked about architecturally, right? So with that as a background, what has IBM been investing in with IBMi? So I'm going to kind of build a chart here, and then we're going to delve more deeply into things. IBMi, obviously, in today's environment, needs to be able to run in an environment where people are going to consume things in the cloud. And a lot of our investment in terms of how you manage the platform has been around making sure you can manage the platform like you'd manage any other platform in a cloud. Now, many of our customers are also extending outside to other clouds. And so we also have had to invest in ways that our applications can incorporate cloud technology And so not everything that is used in the IBMi application is running in IBMi, but the application can reach out to the cloud and get value. And so there's a great deal of investment, not only in how you manage the platform, but how you use the resources that are available in the cloud to enhance what your business is doing. Now, of course, we are a data platform, and so we continue to invest in the database, but the kind of investment that we are making is often based on, okay, what does this platform user need from the data that they didn't need in the past? And that brings us to, for example, security, right? We spent a great deal of time a couple releases ago adding key capabilities to encryption within the database that's built in sort of automatically. And now we do that with storage as well. Okay, so it's not just about the data, it's how you secure it. And it's not just about the data, but how do you make sure that that data and the applications that run on that data are available all of the time? And so a lot of the investments that we have been making strategically involve all of these at the same time. How do you use your data in a cloud securely and make sure it's up all the time, for example, right? So you'll see that while the strategy remains the same and these key capabilities we have to focus on will get more and more investment, there has been a disruptor in the marketplace, and we all know it, and it's the AI stuff. Okay, AI has come in and said to every business user, I hear about this thing called AI. I can use it from a browser at home. How am I going to apply that to my IBMi workload? Well, let me just tell you, first of all, we've been doing things with IBMi and artificial intelligence for quite some time. Way back in 2016, we had the beginning of our customer stories that were based on IBMi clients using open source and traditional RPG to do AI in IBMi. So we did credit score validation, we trained things, we tracked things for food safety, we predicted customer preferences and found customer preferences and did pre-manufacturing processes. We had chatbots created, all of that stuff. If you look back at when we started doing our customer stories, some of the coolest customer stories we had were based on IBMi customers using the technology that we integrate to be able to do specific AI workloads. And then we got to the point where Power was talking about AI intensely. And so when Power 10 was announced, we actually had on stage with our executives an example of how an IBMi workload running DB2 RPG could then take advantage of the fact that there was a Linux partition that was that was using the Power 10 integrated matrix math accelerator to do AI on behalf of an IBMi workload. So a lot of great stuff has happened. We have also integrated some AI directly into the platform itself. Watson Geospatial was announced and delivered in the fourth quarter of 2022, and we already immediately had customers who picked up that artificial intelligence built into DB2 and added it to their solutions because they had been trying to do that externally from DB2, and this solved the problem for them. Meanwhile, in the background, I can't tell you everything that we have going on here, but we have people who are figuring out how to do AI enhancements or augmentations. In fact, there's an extension to the VS Code-based tools that are not only in Merlin, but are out there in the open source community and worked on by the community that can prompt a user's large language model directly from the VS Code-based tools. And we are currently working on the underpinnings for the strategic stuff that we're going to do in the future. And I want to talk about those strategic things now. But if you're talking about IBMi and strategy and AI, it still fits into what we do. As far as our customers and our investment is concerned, we want to make sure that we invest in AI that works for their solutions and data. We don't just want to be a machine that you put an AI workload on. That's not what we're about. We're about implementing AI that can work with your solutions. We're about giving you choices on what AI you want to integrate with. We're not here to tell you there's one and only one way to do it, and then we will try to make it as easy to deploy and manage as possible. While some of our larger customers are investing in hiring data scientists and so on, we don't want every customer to have to figure out how to, or have to hire someone who figures out how to get an AI workload up and running and connected and manage it all the time, right? We want to make that part of what you do as your day-to-day IBMi management. And so there is investment to be made strategically to make that happen. So over the course of the past couple of years, we have been talking to those advisory groups that I had mentioned on a previous slide about what value do they want AI to bring to their businesses. And in general, when you talk to a large group of people, which is what we've done, these are the three general use cases. Number one, I've got an application, it's doing transactions. I know that there are AI workloads out there who, when they see transactions happen, can predict trends in data that are beyond what traditional analytics can do. There are AI workloads that can notice that these transactions look different from most transactions. They're an anomaly. Maybe they're an attempt at fraud. And those AI workloads exist today and are getting better and better all the time. Our clients want to be able to connect their existing data transactions as they're going on with those AI workloads and gain benefit from them. And they want to do it simply. They don't want to have to hire a whole new team to make that happen. Particularly in the small and medium-sized businesses that we often sell into, they want to get value from that in a very simple way. Now, some of our customers are doing this already. I just want to make it clear. Some of those customer examples that we had, they were able to take all the pieces that we provide, plus all the pieces that are out there in the industry, and they were able to make that stuff work. And more power to them. That's great. But a lot of our clients who don't have the resources to devote to hiring experts on AI, they want to get that value as well. Same sort of thing on the second thing down, operations. There are AI workloads out there. There are AI-based tools out there that can actively monitor what's going on a platform or a set of platforms and can then alert or even take action like self-healing to say, oh, this virtual machine needs to be updated. We're going to take care of that. And our clients want us to apply AI to that part of their business as well. It's not just their application, but also how they're managed. And then the final thing is, I want to use AI to help with development. And I'm going to get into a great deal of detail here. I've been talking about this more than I've been talking about anything else, so I'm not going to talk about it more here. Now, it turns out that those top two things are actually very similar to one another. It is the AI tool that you're going to use might be different, but from the point of view of IBMi, it's all about making sure that the AI workload can get the data that it needs in the way that it needs it, using the protocols and standards and so on that it's dependent upon, at the speed that it needs, okay? And so from the IBMi investment side, on the left-hand side, we are investing in the infrastructure, the plumbing, the pieces that are going to be able to feed the necessary data, whether it's application transaction data or whether it's operations data, to those workloads. Now, who are we going to do that with? Well, that is not something I'm ready to announce right now. Next week, by the way, Jesse Gorzinski has a guided tour on Wednesday where he talks a bit more about this. But if you go out there into the world and you ask Google, for example, tell me what AI analytics and what AI operations workloads are out there that you might be able to use, here's just from a quick Google, right? Here are some of the things that we find. And there's no real overlap between the analytics side and the ops side. So I'm not saying that we have to do the exact same thing for both of them, but it is the same kind of concept. What data do these workloads need to be fed to it? Now, likely what's going to happen when the next generation of Power comes out is that we will have a couple of customers who have their own specific AI workload, whether it's in analytics or ops, most likely analytics. And we will have created an easy to deploy option for them and any other customer who uses that kind of thing. But we will then have the infrastructure in place to be able to feed lots of these different AI workloads. And that's an exciting part of what the future of this platform is going to contain. Now, I will mention this is not all future stuff. Right in the middle of that AI ops column is Instana. Instana is currently supported on IBMi. It is currently one of the things that Tim Rowe talks about extensively. Instana, like many other applications, is partially AI, and that's the part that's growing, and it's partially rules-driven, alert-driven, that sort of thing. As an application, it is doing more and more AI stuff. And so we are feeding it necessary information so that it can use its AI to make decisions and operations easier on IBMi. So this is not just a future thing, but most of this stuff for mass consumption is a future kind of thing. And we're investing in that stuff. You'll hear more and more about it over the course of the next year, year and a half, et cetera. All right, but now I want to get to the thing that I've been talking most about recently that's been generating most of the excitement that's been written about in the press and podcasts and so on. I want to talk about how AI can be used to help the developer experience and help customers hire developers and use AI-based tooling to have those developers get more familiar with RPG much more quickly and update code much more quickly. I did a whole guided tour that was about AI strategy and then dived into this. You're going to get some pieces of this here because it's really critical that you understand we're headed in this direction. So if because we as IBM want to help our IBMi clients, if we're going to apply an AI tool to help clients with their existing code, what should we start with? Well, thanks to our interactions with clients and the Fortra survey, we can tell you that when clients do new development on IBMi today, 89% of the time, part of that new development is going to be in RPG. So if we're going to do something with an AI tool that helps programmers on IBMi, and we have to start with some language, we're going to start with RPG. That makes the most sense. Okay. By the way, Tom talked about it. Thank you so much to all of you who respond to this survey year after year. It does have, by design, many of the same questions. We have noted that this top number of how many people are using RPG for new development has grown over the last several years. And that is an indication that our strategy to make modern free format RPG more valuable and accessible to all of the client base, including the new programmers that we hire, it has been successful. People can use RPG for new development, but they are also using other languages like Python, PHP, and Node.js because our strategy is give you options, use the language that makes sense for the part of the workload that it fits best with. Okay, so thank you for answering the questions year over year because we are able to see how much the adoption of various technologies is taking off. Now, we do have other languages, and we have to support those languages as well. But if we're going to do something for the large majority of our clients, we got to start with RPG, even if that wasn't the answer that other platforms may have come up with. For us, we got to start with RPG. Now, fortunately, as I said, RPG free format is the thing that's making the difference there. When we ask customers, what version of RPG are you using for new development? First of all, 93% of them are using ILE-based RPG as opposed to the older RPG, okay? But even among those people, the majority, the significant majority, are using free format RPG. Thus, they're able to use the most modern tools to do free format development and then integrate that into things like modern DevOps, etc. So that's great. So if we're going to help customers hire people and use ILE RPG free format, we should continue to invest in tools that make that easy. And we have been doing that even before AI. But now we're going to apply AI to it, okay? There was a proof of concept done by some IBMers, not on our team, that trained a large language model to be able to assist coders. And the things that it was able to do are ultimately the goals that we want for a code assistant for RPG. An IBMi code assistant tool, and I probably should have changed this. We're talking about it as a RPG code assistant tool right now, but the point is still the same. Our businesses that use IBMi and specifically RPG have said the most important thing that you could help us do, we have so much existing RPG. Some of it's fixed form, some of it's free form, the newest stuff is free form. Okay, but if you can help programmers work with that, then it'll be easier for us to hire people who don't know RPG, give them a tool in addition to the tools you already have that make it easier. Particularly if when they're using the tool, they can use the tool to say create free format ILE RPG based on an English description, so that programmers who may know some other language can come in and say, I want a subroutine that does this, and it sees how the tool generates RPG code. And they say, I see how we do that in RPG. I may know how to do that in Java or C or something. Now I see how I do that same thing in RPG. That would be very helpful. It would also be very helpful, and this might be the most important thing. This is what actually our advisors have been telling us recently. More importantly, maybe than the generating, if you could have a tool that could look at existing code that's in my portfolio that was written 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and explain to the new owner of that code, what is that code doing? Now, if any of you are programmers out there, you know the effort that goes into picking up a piece of code that was written by someone else. First of all, people 20 years ago did not, and 30 years ago, did not document their code as well as they ought to have to be able to pass along the knowledge of what the code is doing to somebody 20 and 30 years later. They may have tried, though I got to tell you, from what I've seen, most people who wrote code back then just wrote it assuming they would be the person who was going to own it forever and that they'd always remember what that code did. So if you have a tool that can look at code and explain in English, what is that code doing? That could reduce the amount of time that it takes for someone to take over the support of that code, to be able to find problems in that code, and in particular, to add something that becomes a new extension to that code. Even if that code itself is going to stay the same, maybe it becomes a service, and now you know what that service does, and you can use it as a service being called by something else. In any case, having a tool which can understand RPG well enough that it can explain in English what this RPG is doing would be very helpful. Then, wouldn't it be cool if you could write a piece of RPG code or show the tool a piece of RPG code and have the tool generate a test program for that, so that you could put that in a test suite that gets run over and over and over again to make sure you didn't break anything when you added the next enhancement? That would be great. Now, the last thing on this list is we all have older RPG. Wouldn't it be nice if this tool could help us transform that older RPG into modern ILE-based free format RPG? Now, we know that there are tools out there in the marketplace that can do that. They are not currently using AI to do that, but I got to tell you, if you train a model to know how to generate modern free format ILE RPG. And if you train a model to be able to explain RPG, even if it's not modern free format RPG, you're halfway to being able to ask the model, maybe even more than halfway, being able to say, okay, I've got this older RPG, transform it into what it is. Because essentially what you're doing is a transitive thing. Internally, it explains what it is that that old RPG did, and then it takes that explanation and feeds it in to the generation. It's not exactly how it happens, but conceptually, you can think that once you've done, generated and examined and explained, you can get more out of it. All right. Well, as I mentioned, there was a group that wrote, that trained a large language model to be able to do these things with RPG. While they were doing that, we were trying to come up with what should a full function code assistant for RPG be able to do, and they proved to us that this could be done. And so that's what we want to create. Okay, now it's not magic to create a model. It takes a significant amount of work, and the work can be done in efficient ways and non-efficient ways. The most efficient way to train it is to say, here's a block of code and here's the explanation of that block of code, right? So if you have a block of code and an English block, an English description of it, you can feed it in. And after enough of those, the large language model will then figure it out. It doesn't need every single thing to be described to it. It needs enough that it can then use the intelligence that's in its neural network to say, this is like that, these pieces are together, and it can then generate English for things it's never seen before based on its knowledge of the code and what it means. You can also do the same thing to do generation and English description, as I mentioned, so it's very similar. To do a test thing is different. You have to train it to understand how you write a program to test a piece of program, but because it knows other languages, other computer languages, and how to test in those computer languages, it can eventually detect patterns. When you're testing RPG code, this is how you do it versus what it might know about how to test in Java or C or whatever. And the same sort of thing for translating from or transforming from old to new. Okay, now you can train models by giving it huge amounts of non-paired code. It takes a lot more resources, and you still have to do some validation when you're done. So we're going to be doing training starting with pairs of things, but then we're going to be moving on to some of that other stuff as well. And that's because the way we're going to do this is we're going to involve the community. And I bet if any of you have heard anything about this, you know this already. We're launching a project to train a ready for primetime AI code assistant in RPG. We are contributing to this, all the RPG that we have that we can take advantage of. So everything in our RPG manuals, the presentations that we've done to teach people about various new capabilities of RPG, et cetera. And then we have reached out to a bunch of experts who agreed before we even started talking about this project, that they would help us by donating code, donating information, et cetera. So you can see some of those people. I have since received many, many more people who've said yes. So I'm either going to have to stop listing these people or I'm going to have 2 pages with names. And thank you very much for all of you who have agreed to contribute material to help train this model. If you're interested in becoming one of the people who helps to train this large language model, we have a place for you to start. Send an email to this AI for IBMi at IBM.com, and then we will contact you and say, okay, if you want to contribute code, here are ways that you can do it, and we need you to sign a license. It's sort of like agreeing that you're going to have an open source license attached to this piece of code, because eventually we have to use your code to train our model, and we need your permission to do it. And if you want to, you can even allow us to put it in eventually to put it in a public GitHub so that everybody can see what we used to train the model. Okay. By the way, you can contribute code and have it stay private if you want that as well. There's a bunch of people who are doing that. And so I want you to be aware you can participate in this if you want to. So that's pretty exciting. All of this AI stuff is not going to be available in the next quarter, right? I've shown you here, there's a lot of AI work that's being done by clients and you can do it today. But these bigger things, having easily consumable workloads for AI analytics connected to your data, that's a ways out. We're working on that internally. We have a few customers we're working with to validate that what we're doing is going to work for them. But in this particular case, we're getting lots of people involved because the more of this stuff that we have, the better the model will be trained, because any large language model that's out there today that even does a bit of RPG did not have very much RPG to work with to get trained. And so it's not very good at it in general. Hey, we want a model that's been trained by a lot of very good RPG that came from people who used RPG to teach other people RPG and to transform businesses by using RPG code. And so the model that we have will have the benefit of all of this community support, and that's going to be a differentiator, I think, between this large language model and any other one that gets done. Okay, all right. So we've come a long way. There's still a lot to be done. The last bit of information here is really a slide that I build very, very quickly, but when you get the PDF, it'll all be built, don't worry, to show you that this platform that we have today is significantly advanced beyond what was originally an AS400 or an I-series. I do this in part because when we started this webcast oh so long ago, that was one of the key driving factors in doing this, was to show how IBMi is not just AS400. But I also do it because I want people to be aware of, to remember the advancements that we've made across the entire operating system and how we do things. So in general, as you see me build this, and I'm going to go very, very fast, as you see me build this, each of these bands represents a technology family that's integrated into this offering, whether it's the Power part of the platform or most of it's IBMi. So let's get going. For example, in security, we did have a digitally signed operating system way back in 2001, the very first operating system ever to be digitally signed so that you could know that the operating system came from us. If it was messed with, you would know that it had been messed with by somebody else. But we've done lots and lots of security things. And while there were plenty of them in 5.2, 5.3, and 5.4, I just started adding some things that were recognizable as being across the system. So DB2 column level encryption, DB2 masking, authority collection, secure by default, all that stuff gets added because there are always advancements we want to make it more easy to secure things on this platform than they ever were before, and often than can be done on other platforms. Now that we started talking about DB2 capabilities, for example, that new query engine, DB2 SQE query engine stage 1, came out in 2002 and advanced throughout the years. We were able to add in 2008, if you were using the MySQL programming language, have DB2 be the storage engine for that. We had the row and column access control that I talked about before, but then we did DB2 mirror and we added SQL Boolean capability in 7.5. So we are, again, constantly doing things in that space. What about storage? Well, we've attached the first SAN to IBMi back when it was AS400 in 2001. But then as we had SAS storage, SSD storage, moving most active data to the SSD, attaching NVMe storage, all of that happened in this transition from AS400 to i5OS to IBMi. I became chief architect in 2007, and since then we've done the Power HA capability, the ability to do technology refreshes, to be able to move partitions that are actively working, to be able to automatically encrypt things with hardware support, to be able to put IBMi in the IBM Power's virtual server out there in the world, and a whole lot more stuff than that. If you're talking about application development, we introduced PACE way back in 2001, but by the time we got to the later 2000s, all of our open source was running in that environment. We had the first free format capabilities in RPG for SQL back in 2006, but then free format RPG itself came out in the TR7 timeframe of 7.1. And of course, now we have Node and Python, and we're doing our open source with RPMs, and that'll change as the technology changes. Okay, managing the platform. We started doing it on the web way back in 2008, and now we're up to our new navigator, right? Managing this platform should never be a green screen thing anymore. It should always be possible to do anything that you need in this web or mobile versions of things. And so there has been tremendous investment since the time we became IBMi into doing things that seriously, we would have never been able to do in the architecture as it existed when the AS400 first came out, or even as it was back in 2001. As a development community, as a platform offering community, we're very proud of the investment that we've been able to continue to make, and most of these capabilities were based on customer value, application value that we've been able to build in to get you more value over time for the investment and commitment that you make. This platform has grown a lot in the time that we have made it available to our customers, and it has a long future ahead of it, and we'll continue doing the very best we can to solve problems for businesses using all of the technology that matter to it in ways that can be very valuable to you. And Tom, I think that turns it back over to you.
Well, that is fantastic, Steve. Wow, big round of applause to you. We've had some questions coming in. I guess after listening to you, I'm always reminded how proud I am and how fortunate I am to have built a career around the AS400 and IBMi platform. So thank you so much, Steve. Before we leave today, we do have one more polling question for the audience. It's more about how can Fortra help you? So I'll launch that out there. You know, I talked earlier about doing technology updates. We like to have those one-on-one calls with our customers. It's a great time to learn about what's on your mind. And my gosh, the stories I hear over the years, I love having those conversations. BI, data access, that concern, HADR concerns. Maybe you want some help with document management. We do a lot in helping to, we use AI, machine learning, and document management space to help customers out in that space. And then, of course, the free security scan. I'll leave that up. I'm going to look at some questions out there, Steve, because you had my mouse. I'm not prepared here a little bit on this.
No, I'm sorry.
So here's a question. No, that's great. I mean, this kind of goes along with it. I think you hopefully stole this, but from Siad, he's wondering, is IBMi going to stay in the future?
Absolutely. I tried to make that point a couple of times, and maybe you wrote the question before the answer. But yeah, there is no end. There is no end to this platform, right? The business is just too good. We have tens of thousands of unique companies who own this, representing seriously well over 100,000 enterprises that depend upon the workloads that run on IBMi, and many of those workloads are critical to your daily life. I just met a customer who is really an ISV, who 1 in every 5 train cars that is out there in the United States has a connection back to an IBMi application that is keeping track of what it's doing and all that stuff. I mean, the transportation industry in this country and in some places around the world, the delivery and logistics, the banking, the healthcare, the education, IBMi is integral to all of that. And that's what makes us a good business, right? We are able to provide significant value to those businesses, and we're able to give them new technology over time. And so, yeah, there's no reason to believe that we're ever not going to be around.
Very good, very good. What about the cloud movement? We have a question concerns to can IBMi exist in the cloud, and what are we doing to help customers in that area?
Right. So, well, first of all, I'm going to plug again, anybody who's listening to this, please go and get the data that came from the most recent Fortra survey, even as you prepare to participate again this year, what it showed was that many of our clients are still using IBMi solely in their data center, but many of them are also using IBMi and cloud together. Now, it really depends on what you mean by cloud. Are you going to be able to run IBMi in AWS? No, AWS is built on non-power stuff, and we require power. But there are cloud providers, including some of the major cloud providers, who are now creating power real estate so that they can run IBMi and other power operating systems in a cloud environment, because they realize that that is a valuable thing to do. Meanwhile, of course, IBM has our own part of the IBM cloud that is purely power. It's called Power Virtual Server. And so if you want to run IBMi purely cloud, we can do that. People are doing it. But by and large, more of our clients are running some of their stuff on-prem or within their own management. Sometimes that's being managed by a partner. And then they're using cloud-based services that may or may not run on IBMi. So yes, absolutely, we're investing there. Yes, absolutely, you could do it. Any given cloud provider, when you ask them, can you support IBMi? Well, if they have invested in creating a power-based landscape, they probably can. And if they haven't, it's not because IBMi hasn't done it, it's because the cloud provider hasn't done it. They can do it if they want to.
Very good, very good. Just a couple questions we had around the recording of this event. It was recorded. We will share this out later. You should see it out on the Help Systems website. And just to remind you again, out on YouTube, we've broken up this webinar over the years under Steve Will and IBM. If you scan for that on YouTube, you'll find them. We'll probably take parts of this too and break it out for future viewing too. Interesting one. I'm assuming COBOL is together with RPG, and we got a couple questions around COBOL. What are the chances of COBOL assist on IBMi? We're seeing that in the mainframe for Z environments. What about IBMi?
Understood. So first, the important thing there is that RPG has far more usage on the platform than COBOL does. In Z, COBOL is even, well, is as big as RPG is here. That's why they attacked it first. Second thing, our COBOLs are different. So we can't just take what was learned by the model for Z COBOL and apply it to IBMi, but it will give us a kickstart when we get to that. We're going to address RPG and some of the key things there first, while we're working with our Z counterparts to understand how much of what they learned can we apply when we get around to helping COBOL. So that is a strategic future thing, but first we got to learn how to do this for RPG. There's a great deal that we need to learn first. Oh boy,
all right.
Are we already past 11:30? Yes, we are.
We are. Do you mind another question or two? Because we got some really good ones out there yet.
Okay, I have people waiting for me. Go ahead, quick.
Oh, okay. And maybe I can just answer this one. Do we see any new customers adopting IBMi?
Yes.
Yes, we do. Banking, transportation, warehousing, just to name a few. Education industry. So it's by industry and it's driven by application, really.
Yep. Yeah. We've got partners and ISVs who know how to go to customers in their part of the business and sell the idea that they'll have a much better platform experience if they're on IBMi. But we don't go and sell against without a partner or an ISV in place. And by the way, I told the story. I have a lot of clients who have acquired their competitors, right? That's new workload on IBMi, and that's essentially a new customer. The customer is paying who might be an existing customer, but if a sanitation provider buys another sanitation provider, that second sanitation provider is a new customer as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and we see that like credit unions, banking, where the banks don't even know that they're really running on IBMi or the credit union. It's because it's being hosted. And there's a lot of that going on, and you don't get credit for that necessarily. So Steve, I know you got to run. I want to thank all of you customers who have stuck with us for such a long webinar today. We appreciate that. We will talk to you in the future. And this is, everything Fortra does from a cybersecurity perspective. All I really want you to learn from here is if you're having any cybersecurity issue on any platform, or you're worried about being the next victim of ransomware or whatever, give Fortra a call. Look at us. We'll help you with email, unstructured data, structured data, vulnerability. We'll protect your brand out in the wild. And we can do a lot of this as a managed offering. And then, of course, don't forget about us on automation, on IBMi and off IBMi, and the fact that we work on many IBM products, BRMS, Power HA, and RDI, to name those three. And again, thank you, Steve, so much, and have a wonderful day.
All right, bye now.
Bye-bye.